Where do the colours in fireworks come from? Well, different chemicals give off different colours when they burn. But first things first, what makes a firework spark? Let's look at something that we can get quite close to, a common sparkler. The sparkler will give off white light because it contains metals like aluminium or iron. Once lit from one end, it will burn progressively till the other end, giving off white light. Fireworks can be different colours because different materials burn different colours, mainly metal oxides and metal salts, which is exactly what I have here. Let's test out a couple of different colours. Just remember guys, I'm a trained professional, so don't try this at home. I'm going to be using an old sparkler which I've made into a loop. Let's burn our first chemical. What I'm hoping to see is a few white sparks coming out, and that's because the metal oxides in here are going to be burning with the flame. There you have it. Rinsing off, let's try our next chemical. What I'm hoping to see here are some orange flames. Atoms are the tiny particles in substances. When they heat up, they get really excited. This energy gives off light. With this next one, what I'm hoping is to see some really strong red flames. This next chemical should give off a soft orange flame. It's not really my favourite. Alright, moving on. This chemical here should be fun, and it should give off a lovely green glow. I think this one is my favourite. It's going to give off a really good green glow. This one will burn for quite a while because it's a little bit stubborn. Fireworks have been part of celebrations ever since their invention by the Chinese in the 7th century. Still burning. With our last chemical, we're hoping to see a nice purple glow. So what I'm going to try now is to try and get them all burning at the same time, to have a rainbow of colours in front of me. Just remember guys, I'm a trained professional, so don't try this at home. Safety goggles on, we're going to light this up, so hit the lights. In the beginning, the flame colours may look the same, but as they continue to burn, you really see the colours coming out in each of the chemicals. That's because the atoms in the chemicals are all initially gaining energy when I light them. But as they burn, the atoms in each chemical drop from one energy level down to the next. Each chemical's energy level starts in a different place. As they drop from one energy level down to the next, they give out a different coloured light. And that is how they make fireworks. Yep, green's still definitely my favourite.
Today on Get Clever, we're talking about energy. We talk about energy a lot because it's all around us. But what exactly is it? In the simplest way you can put it, energy is the ability to do work. There's all kinds of energy. That's an E for energy. Today we're just going to talk about a couple. One is kinetic energy, and another one is potential energy. So kinetic energy is the energy of movement. You get kinetic energy from all things that move. For example, a car driving on the road, a ball flying up and flying down, that's all kinetic energy. A dog running through a park, even a planet spinning through space has kinetic energy. The heavier an object is, or the faster it's going, the more kinetic energy it has. Potential energy is the energy stored in an object. This energy can be gravitational, chemical, electric, or elastic. Okay, so that's energy. Did you know that energy has its own law? It's called the law of conservation of energy, and it states that energy can neither be created nor destroyed, but it can only change forms. Today on Get Clever, we're going to be talking about heat and light. Heat and light are both forms of energy. The sun is obviously a big source of light energy. In fact, on a smaller scale, even light bulbs apply, anything with light coming out of it. So this episode, make sure and keep an eye out for heat and light.
Electricity. We all have a basic idea of what it is and what it does. We see it in nature as a bolt of lightning. It is a form of energy that can build up in one place or travel from one place to another. It travels through power cords, makes the TV work, the light bulb light up, and the fridge keep cold. But how does it travel? How does it get from the socket to the light bulb? Through a circuit or a closed loop. And I'm about to make one out of bananas. I'm not even kidding. Let's get started. What I'm going to use: bananas, some cables, a microcontroller, a speaker, a bunch of other specialized electronic components, and a battery pack. The microcontroller is a special chip that allows you to send it information to create an action. Electricity is going to travel in a circuit, and with all these pieces here, we're going to help that circuit talk to the microcontroller and make our sound. There are lots of different types of energy, but I'm using electrical energy to make my banana piano work. All matter is made up of atoms, and each atom has smaller parts called electrons. When we create a circuit and add a power source like our battery pack, we can force those smaller parts, or electrons, to flow from one object to another. The electrons flow in a particular direction around our circuit, and this is called an electrical current. Certain materials are better at passing these electrons on than others. Bananas are pretty good at this. In order to keep the electrical current flowing in the same direction, we need to close the circuit. And that's where I come in. What we're doing is acting as a conductor. So I'm holding this ground pin and the electricity is flowing through me, but it starts at the battery pack. And it flows from the battery pack through the electronics, up into the bananas, into my hand, through me, back out through my other hand, through the grounding pin, and then back into the electronics. Okay, we can turn our battery pack on and see if it works. And play the bananas. And every time I touch the key or the banana, it makes a sound because we're completing the circuit. Call me Beethoven, guys. It works. And guys, it's not just bananas that work. You can use any fruit or vegetable. Up next, I'm recoding a brand new hit single on my banana piano. Can you peel it? Can you peel it? Can you peel it?
So here I am in the solar system, or at least something similar to the solar system. Obviously, not everything's the right size or even necessarily all lined up, but it's a general idea of what the solar system looks like. Closest to the sun, we've got the tiny steel planet of Mercury. Coming in from there, we have the shimmering white clouds of Venus. And then here, that blue-green marble that we call Earth. Next, we have the pinky reds of Mars, and then further out, beyond the asteroid belt, we have the red giant of Jupiter, made up of the same stuff that our sun is, except not quite big enough to form another star. Further out, we've got Saturn. Now, our Saturn doesn't have rings, unfortunately, but it's roughly the right colour. From there, we have Uranus, or as some people call it, Uranus. And then right out on the edge of our solar system, we have the cold, windy planet of Neptune. So it's not all smooth sailing and floating around the planets in space. There's a lot of the building blocks left behind from when the solar system formed 4.5 billion years ago. This space rubble is what we commonly refer to as asteroids and comets. They even have belts in space. No, not belts for the planets to hold their pants up, but belts of space rubble that contain asteroids. There's a massive gap between Mars and Jupiter, and this is where one of the asteroid belts is found. It's 150 million kilometres wide, and it's filled with millions of asteroids. Imagine I'm in the asteroid belt with Jupiter here and Mars here. Now, asteroids come in all sorts of different sizes and shapes, with millions over 1 kilometre wide and many others much smaller. As Jupiter makes its way around the Sun, occasionally it will knock one of these asteroids out of the belt towards Earth, and that's where things get interesting. When an asteroid gets knocked out of the belt and heads towards Earth, it can either burn up in the atmosphere as a shooting star, or if it hits Earth, that's when it becomes a meteorite. Comets come from much further away and hang out on the edge of the solar system past Neptune. It's much colder out here and they're covered in ice, so they're a bit like a dirty snowball. In fact, we think that comets hit the Earth, melted, and over a long period of time formed the oceans. The other cool thing about comets is they have tails. As they get closer to the Sun, they give off a trail of dust and gas behind them. As the Earth passes through the dusty trail of a comet, we see it as a meteor shower. Looks pretty spectacular to me.
This episode is all about energy. And as Nate said, there are lots of different types of energy. Here are 5 you might not have heard of. Magnetic. This is the energy created by a magnetic field, just like the magnets on your fridge. Thermal. This is the energy created by fire or the sun. This is the energy you can feel as heat. Ow! Gravitational potential, or GPE, represents the stored energy in an object depending on its weight or how high it is above the Earth's surface, like a skydiver falling towards the Earth. Sound. When we make a sound, we create a wave of energy that we can hear and sometimes see. Elastic. A type of energy which occurs when an object is either stretched or squashed, like jumping on a trampoline or blowing up a balloon. Now that's clever.
I love being out in the country and taking a big, deep breath of fresh air. It feels great. Oxygen, which is all around us, is really important to human bodies because it provides the good stuff or the nutrients that allows our body to produce new cells. When we breathe air in, oxygen is absorbed by special cells in our lungs and then transported in our blood to wherever it's needed all around the body. All living things breathe, but in different ways. Some animals breathe through their lungs, like humans, dogs and cats, while other animals breathe through their skin, like frogs, and other animals can breathe through their gills, like fish. But did you know that plants can breathe too? We humans breathe oxygen in and carbon dioxide out, but plants do the exact opposite. They take in carbon dioxide and release oxygen into the atmosphere. What a perfect relationship humans and plants have. Every part of a plant breathes, day or night, just like us. They take in carbon dioxide or inhale oxygen or tiny holes along the entire length of the plant, through the entire length of the plant, from the leaves to the flowers and even the roots. The roots can pick up carbon dioxide from tiny air pockets in the soil. The plant releases oxygen or exhales oxygen in the same way, but you can't see this happening. Or can you? I've got a simple way to show that plants can breathe, and now that the sun's out, it's a perfect time for my experiment. First things first, you want to find yourself a large fresh leaf. Make sure you find one straight from a tree and not one you've picked up from the ground. This is going to be really important because we want to make sure the leaf is fresh so that we can see it breathing. Once you've found your leaf, you'll need a large bowl so we can see our leaf better and a jug full of water. Also, make sure you have a magnifying glass handy because that way we can see our plant breathing. And I almost forgot, you're going to need a stone as well because your leaf will stay submerged underwater. Take your large leaf and place that straight into the bowl. Make sure you grab that rock, place it in the middle so our leaf stays fully submerged. Grab your water and make sure you fill it all the way into your bowl, fully covering your entire leaf. All you need to do now is take that bowl to a sunny spot, wait about an hour,
and then grab your magnifying glass. So many bubbles. Essentially what's happening here is the leaf is taking in the water and the carbon dioxide to be able to produce oxygen, which we see as small bubbles across the entire surface of the leaf. Plant doesn't have lungs like we do, but they're still living things. Now that I'm done with this experiment, I may just leaf it right here.
I'll try and keep it short. Hi, my name's James Dodd. We're here today checking out one of my artworks, which is a combination of both weird science and weird art, and it's called The Painting Mill. I love to describe my machine as a mutant power tool because it's chopped up from heaps of other machines and sort of squished together, and then it becomes a zombie mutant cordless drill, and then I sort of drive it in a weird way. I've got a bike attached to some rollerblades and some skateboard wheels and some cordless drills and some brushes and some aluminium and some timber and some canvas and some paint and probably other things as well. A basic machine is something that performs a simple action, so it might be a lever. In my case, I've used motors, and as the motors spin, they move another drill around the top of a canvas with a spinning brush in it, and then that's all moved by these little joysticks on a remote control handset, and that's how I make paintings with a machine. I came up with this idea after having a bunch of small ideas in my head which didn't quite fit together, and then at one point had this eureka moment, and I was like, all right, I've got it. It's going to be all these little bits together, and it's going to be some weird science and some weird art, and we'll see what happens. This artwork takes its cues from a couple of games. There's an old one called Etch-a-Sketch, where you drive a little line around a flat surface. It's a bit like a spirograph, you might know, where you make lots of concentric or rotating circles. It's an ongoing project for me. I had to do a bunch of research and practice a bunch of things before I could get to the point that you see here. And so this is its third version. It's actually version 3.5. There is a bit of control that you have with this machine, but it doesn't make pictures in the way that you might think about it. It makes abstract pictures. I can predict the kinds of patterns this is going to make, but I'm also interested in trying to make it do strange things that I hadn't predicted before, so that I'm always experimenting with that, and then when I find a new thing, I can add that to the range of ideas I have. I don't think it's difficult to bring science and art together. I think that science brains and art brains are the same. They each love exploring things, and they each love putting themselves in places that they don't know the answer to. At school, I loved both science and art, but in the end, my art passion won over, and I've spent most of my time focusing on becoming a great artist. I love artworks that are interactive. I have kids that come up to me and want to know all about what's happening. I have grandmas that have heaps of questions and want to know how it works. And then every different person comes with a different perspective, and I love being able to share a conversation with each of them. As far as a message or interpretation of this artwork, I want people to leave here thinking about the things that they see, not having to be the same all the time. Looking at all the things around them in an alternative or creative way so that they might choose to change things or adapt things to the way they want them to be.
Let's just do it. Earlier in the episode, Nate was talking about the different types of energy. Are you doing it? Well, I have found the perfect example of two types of energy, potential and kinetic. This swing is going to pull me up in the air, which is storing potential energy. When that swing lets go, the stored potential energy will turn into kinetic energy. I want to... No, I'm not doing it. The things I do for science. Here we go. Let's check out what's happening next time on Get Clever.